Like 3 weeks ago, I officiated a wedding. I don't officiate as many weddings as I used to, mainly because my kids are at a certain age, and so weddings just take a lot of effort and time and energy. And I got my baseball on the weekends now, so I don't always say yes to a lot of them. But it was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful celebration of two people's love and their families and their friends. It was just one of those moments that so reflected who they were and what they're all about. And what was interesting about this wedding is I ran into a lot of people that I just haven't seen in a while. This one couple I ran into, and they went to New Abbey like 6 years ago. And I hadn't seen them, and they just said, man, we just have to tell you that New Abbey just changed us. Changed our lives. It changed the way that we see God. It changed the way that we see the world, and we're just so thankful for it. And they since have moved to Sacramento. Haven't seen them, like I said, in 6 years. And I've just been wrestling with that. You would think the first thing I would do is be like, that's so beautiful and so good. But I'm going to tell you a secret. I've actually heard that hundreds of times. I've heard that about New Abbey. That it has changed you, that it has healed you, that it has freed you, that it has done something for you. What left me troubled for weeks is that hasn't moved us one step closer to sustainability or maturity, that story. And I wrestle with that as a pastor. We are amazing at safety here. We are amazing at creating healing here. I think we have a big journey ahead of figuring out how to grow up with one another and create maturity. And I just think it's hard. I think it's a different part of the journey. And I don't ever want to lose that. I don't ever want to lose the part of New Abbey that just tells a bigger story of God. That's literally our mission statement, right? A Jesus community telling a bigger story of God. I believe that we do that. I believe that we look at things in a different way. We look at our ancient stories. It's fresh. It's beautiful. It's reflective of your lives. That we match this big reality of Los Angeles that we live in. And yet, I just don't want to leave it there in just the place of healing and safety. I don't want to lose that, but I want to grow up, to be honest. I want to be people of maturity. I want to be people who are committed to things in the world. I want to be people who don't just heal over there and leave, but they moved to Sacramento. They weren't doing anything wrong. It's cheaper. I get it. That's the point. I get why they moved, right? It happens all the time. There's been people who've moved, and they've come back. I remember this one a couple years ago. And they just said to me, I just wanted to come back this Sunday to tell you, we no longer go to church anymore. But I no longer hate God in the church because of this place. That's so good. That's huge. And I love that. And what I long for this place is that when people stay, that you stay not because you need the healing. If you just get all the healing and then go, man, we're never going to grow up. I want people to say, I'm healed. I'm going through it, and I'm going to stick around, not really because I even need this place anymore. I'm sticking around because I know others need it as well. And there's power in my narrative and in my journey and what I've gone through, and I want to make sure that the next group has it. That's the best of a faith community. That's what makes community beautiful, is that when you look around this room, you see all kinds of different human beings at different stages of life and places of life, and that we get to share in those stories together. And the other diversity that I long for is that diversity and that spectrum of maturity that we can share with one another. So the thing I want to talk about today is a transforming into mature love. I think about transformation all the time. It's probably the word that I think about the most. It's what I really think that Jesus came to do, is move us from one form, whatever that form may be, and then move us into another form, a form that is healthy and beautiful and whole. I think that's a better way of talking about the story of God that we were given. That there's a form over here. We were all just given a form. Right? We're born into a family, born into a country, born into a place. A lot of it you didn't ask for. That's just what you were given. And so much of the journey of life is that you transform eventually into the thing that you want to be. And hopefully that thing is healthy and mature and healthy and good and beautiful and all of that. And I think that's the work that Jesus is trying to do. But as I keep thinking about that reality of transforming into love, the word mature just kind of kept coming to me all week long. How do we transform into mature love? Because there's all kinds of versions of love out there. Have you ever had anyone tell you that they love you and they still sound like an asshole? Anybody? Yes. You're like, that's not the love that I want. No, thank you. I'm looking for love that's mature, that can be spacious, that can hold, that can be honest, that can grow. That's the love that I'm looking for, and that love takes effort, and that love takes work. So to talk about mature love, we're going to talk about some things. We already talked about some wedding tales, if we can do that. Then we're going to talk about Wednesday night revivals at Aunt Judy's church. Talk about a horrible time. If we can talk about the Wednesday night revivals at my Aunt Judy's church, then we can talk about being practitioners, the practitioner framework. And if we can talk about a framework, then we can talk about healing. And if we can talk about healing, then maybe we can just say it's okay. And if we can talk about that it's okay, then we can talk about growing up. And if we can grow up, then we'll just look at a few of our trauma responses to wrap it up on a Sunday morning. Follow along with me in Mark chapter 7. It goes like this. One day, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus, right? The big dogs, the mega pastors, the priests, they all flew in on their private jets to see Jesus. And they noticed that some of his disciples, I think that's funny, thank you, that some of his disciples failed to follow the Jewish ritual of hand washing before eating. And the Jews, especially the Pharisees, do not eat until they have poured water over their cupped hands. I can't now, brown cow. Unique New York. We're good? Good. We got this. The Jews, especially the Pharisees, do not eat until they have poured water over their cupped hands, as required by their ancient traditions. Similarly, they don't eat anything from the market until they immerse their hands in water. This is but one of many traditions they have clung to, such as their ceremonial washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. We're on the same one? Perfect. I know you are so inspired. Those are all of your life verses right there. That's beautiful. So, the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law asked him, why don't your disciples follow our age-old tradition? They eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony. And Jesus replied, I love this. He just gets into it. You hypocrites. What a great way to start. Do that at a Thanksgiving dinner. Next time your family says something, it'll be a good time. When they say the Bible says, and you just say, you hypocrites. You say, I'm just acting like Jesus. It's great. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, for he wrote, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. For you ignore God's laws and substitute your own tradition. Then he said, you skillfully sidestep God's laws in order to hold on to your own tradition. For instance, Moses gave you the law from God, honor your father and mother, and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of father or mother must be put to death. But you say it's all right for people to say to their parents, sorry, I can't help you, for I have vowed to give to God what I have given to you. In this way, you let them disregard their needy parents. And so you cancel the word of God in order to hand down your own tradition. And this is only one example among many others. Then Jesus called to the crowd to come and hear. All of you listen, he said, and try to understand. It's not what goes into your body that defiles you. You are defiled by what comes from your heart. Then Jesus went into a house to get away from the crowd, and his disciples asked him what he meant by the parable he had just used. Don't you understand either, he asked. Can't you see that the food you put into your body cannot defile you? Food doesn't go into your heart, but only passes through the stomach and then goes into the sewer. By saying this, he declared that every kind of food is acceptable in God's eyes. And then he added, it's what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. I wanted to make sure you didn't skip anything. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you. That was a mouthful. Let's do a little bit of work. This is like one of those original passages that I read at New Abbey 11 years ago, because I think it's one of those passages that helps us deconstruct some things. Let some things go. Jesus is immediately standing up to the religious leaders of his day, because the religious leaders of his day have a certain view about who God is and what God does and what the scriptures say. And I think that's most of you in this room. When I say things like conservative or progressive, let me define. I don't mean conservative politically. I'm not interested in that in this conversation. I mean conservative is in this reality that you are just trying to conserve something. That's what you're conservative about. In every generation, somebody is conservative. They are conserving something that works for them. The religious leaders of Jesus' day had a certain amount of power, and they are conserving their traditions and their way of life in order to keep that world going. It works for them. Sometimes you conserve things and it doesn't work for everybody else. But that's not why you're conserving it. Following with me so far? You are now progressive because you are progressing from the thing that you used to conserve. So now you have progressed from that thing. There will come a day in which you are conservative about the things that you conservative from before, right? And that you progress from. You get where I was going there, I think. If not, we'll figure it out later. The point is, we're always in this cycle of conserving and progressing. And so in this passage, what's interesting is Jesus is talking to the conservatives of his day and saying, you're missing the thing behind the thing. It's not helpful how you see the scriptures. It's not helpful how you see God, because you're preventing people from coming to God, and you're preventing people from understanding their own true humanity. And Jesus does this all of the time, by the way. You may remember the story where Jesus goes into a synagogue on a Sabbath day, and there's a man whose hand is shriveled. And they're like, he better not heal the man's hand on the Sabbath. And Jesus is like, you are dumb. That is dumb. The man I have the ability to heal the man. Why would I not do that in this moment? And sometimes we just make up religious laws because we think that we're doing right, but it's actually not helpful. In 2007, I went to South Africa, and we went to a village that was like 70% HIV. It was kids having kids because they didn't have contraceptives. And I remember asking the missionaries, why don't you give them condoms? And they said, we would never do that. We're teaching them abstinence. You are dumb, I think is the answer. That's just dumb. You're missing the point. They are literally killing themselves because you are so stuck to what you want to conserve that you're not going to preserve life. And that's where Jesus is at now. He's like, who cares about how they wash their hands? They're hungry. That's it. And I understand there's all kinds of laws, and this is what separates you as Jews from Gentiles, but Jesus is constantly trying to get away from that. He's trying to free his disciples and the crowds from these religious laws that limit them. Like so many of you, you were told you could not possibly have your sexuality and have your faith at the same time. That was an impossibility. And you know that that's no longer true. Jesus is saying, you're okay. The Bible, quite frankly, doesn't care about what skin touches what skin. It doesn't care. Pick it. I say that all the time. I want you to really think about that. The Bible doesn't care. Pick your favorite skin parts. You want to put an ear to an elbow, rub them real hard. Bible could give a shit. Does that make sense? That's not now you pick whatever parts you want. The Bible doesn't care. That's the point. That's not what defiles you. The Bible is very interested in dynamics of sexual power. Of course it is. It's very interested in any form of abuse. It's very interested in your health and your wholeness. And that's what Jesus is trying to lead people towards. He's trying to free you from a box that you are in, that you can move from this and that you can progress over to this thing. My Aunt Judy went to this wild charismatic church. Of course her name was Aunt Judy, for the love of God, right? And she was a faithful Christian in whatever that meant in her world, where she would go to church Sunday morning and Sunday night and then the Wednesday night tent revival, because that's just what you did. And I was always fascinated that this person, I'm gonna tell you ahead of time, I'm gonna be judgy here. Great. This person would go to church all the time and yet still seems so cruel in her heart and so mean and so hateful. And that never added up to me. What good is it if you're preserving all of the washing your hand traditions, but you still don't love people? What good is it that you can memorize all of the scriptures, but you're not kind to your neighbor? What good is it that you have tithed every week, but you're not generous in your heart? This is what Jesus is getting to. My family was wild that way. I remember my family going to church a lot, but there was still something off that I never fully understood. I remember my uncle and my dad. One of the things I remember wildly about my grandparents and my aunt and uncle is that they're crazy racist. My dad is part Mexican. And I'll always remember as a 6-year-old, my uncle calling my dad a beaner and a wetback and them getting into a fist fight in front of me. I didn't know what that meant when I was 6 years old. But I remembered, how do we go to so much church, put so much of God's word in us, and then what's in us is hate and vile that spills out within us? My aunt is a white woman. She married a black man, and my grandparents removed my aunt from the will to make sure that he didn't get any money. How can that vileness be within you? And I remember as a kid thinking, you all keep telling me to come hear the good news. That doesn't look like good news. And I think what I'm saying is that so many of us are in this room because we've been to places or churches or all kinds of things, politics, you name it, where there's just hypocrisy, where it's like, that doesn't add up to the actual values of Jesus that I think. We're saying one thing, but doing another. And I think what Jesus is trying to free us to is look to the thing behind the thing and the commands that I'm trying to give you. So when we think about transforming into mature love, I want to just look at it in two separate sections. The first section is this: safety and healing. Maybe you're here in New Abbey today because you just need safety and healing. You don't have to do any other work right now. Lay on the bottom of that rowboat and just relax. Would you know that there are other people in this room that they have done their work? If you're still, I still hear it all the time from my queer brothers and sisters in this room, still asking, is it okay that I'm gay? Is it really okay? And there's so many of you in this room, you once asked that question as well. You once walked into these rooms, and it's the hope and the strength of your other queer brothers and sisters that have gone before you that gave you the hope that it really is okay. You are okay. You are accepted. There is nothing wrong with you. You did not start in sin, abomination, whatever. You started as the image of God. You are still made in the image, and you are good. And then you have reminded all people, regardless of sexual orientation, that you are good and that you are okay. And that's so much of the work that we do here. If that's what you need and you never get anything else, I really am okay with that. I hope that you know more of the reality that you are loved, that you are accepted, that you are good, that you are made in God's image. And I hope that that transforms your life, or at least just gives you peace, gives you wholeness. And there's nothing else that you need to do. What I'm fascinated, though, with the story is that Jesus moves from there. It says, after he said that to everyone else, hey, it doesn't matter what foods you eat. Honestly, that's a waste of your time. And anytime someone tries to bring you into that conversation, by the way, does anyone still ask you to prove yourself by using the Bible? Stop it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to argue with that person on Facebook comments or Instagram. You don't have to prove anything about anything any longer. You don't have to show up to that Thanksgiving meal. You don't have anything to prove. Free yourself from that. Just come and know that you're okay. And if you're in a world where you don't feel okay, come here and Candace and Crystal will remind you that you're okay. Come here and Eric will let you know that you're okay. Come here and get a hug from Mickey. There's some mature people sitting here right now, right? Come and talk to Scott and Amy. Come and talk to them. They will remind you of what's true. If that's not true in your family, let this be your family, and they will remind you. And you don't have to do anything else. Just accept it. But there's always this other invitation from Jesus. It said after he reminded them of what's true about these things, of like, who cares about what food? You ever just had a giant conversation of wasting your time? Don't do any of that anymore. It's just not interesting. And you're okay if that's where you want to be. But then it says Jesus left the crowd and he brought his disciples. And this is what we've been looking at as we're in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus never condemns anyone to hell. Never. Not once. Why? Because the Bible's not interested in hell. It doesn't really talk about it. When it talks about hell, it's talking about Gehenna, which is a trash dump outside of Jerusalem. Really not that complicated. We made it weird. Evangelical Christians, woohoo, it's the thing. Every tradition has their own weird thing. That was our weird thing. We got extra super weird about it from our Protestant Reformation all the way. I'll save you. If you want to know more, we'll have a little whiskey and we'll talk about the formation of hell and it happened over 700 years. It's honestly crazy, right? It was the whole power game. But that's not what Jesus is talking about. When Jesus ever uses hell, all that Jesus is saying is, life can be really hard. Do you want your life to be like that garbage dump over there? That's what Jesus is saying. No, that seems like that sucks, right? Yeah. Jesus is like, no, I want you to have life and life to the fullest, so I want to bring you into this thing. So Jesus invites disciples always. And Jesus says, if you're the crowd and you just want to end the story with, you're okay and you're accepted, perfect. I hope you find some freedom there. However, if you want to be my disciple and you want to follow me, let me tell you even more what this thing means. And this is where Jesus invites them into maturity. Even the disciples are like, hey, we still don't fully understand this thing. And Jesus is like, man, you spent so much of your religious world trying to fix everything that's out here. Have you ever noticed in those religious worlds that they're always pointing to everything that's going on out here, that this is evil and this is wrong and this is bad? Have you ever noticed that it's always scapegoating everything else in the world? Jesus is like, that's so uninteresting. That's not what we do in my reality. That's not what we do in my kingdom. What we do in my kingdom is we take a deep look at what's going on within our own hearts. because this is where the real stuff is at. Jesus was like ahead in psychology and spirituality and all of these things by thousands and thousands of years, right? He's like, this is where the work needs to be done. When you find yourself pointing at everything else that's going on out here, it's the election, it's them, it's got to be that political party, it's my aunt, it's that, then you know something unhealthy is going on inside of you. When you start to find maturity, when you start to find health, you're going to start to take some ownership and you're going to have some self-awareness, and then you're going to look at some things in your life. Instead of starting the narrative with, I'm bad, I'm evil, I'm whatever, then it's going to start to be like this. I feel greedy today. I'm probably off in my trauma responses inside. I noticed today that I bought a lot of things on the internet in a really obsessive sort of way. There's some smiles here. I think maybe there's something happening within me. I feel obsessive and compulsive towards this. Oh, I'm not evil. I'm just learning to cope with things, and I'm learning to care. So when you see that list that Jesus makes, what if that's just trauma responses? You lean into something, So I am feeling bad today, and I have found myself doing a little bit of slander. I am talking shit about Beth in accounting again, right? And maybe instead of it being that, it's really the story of, oh, there's something going on inside of me. And this is not an opportunity for guilt or shame. This is a beautiful opportunity for analysis and growing up and maturity. Our trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fight, you get it. A bear's coming at you. You're trained to fight. I'm trained to fight. I grew up in a home that was a war zone, and at any moment, I needed to be ready, whatever, to fight what was coming through that door, and I'm great at it. It's my strength, and it's also a bad when I notice that I'm like ready to go attack some people, I'm like, I should maybe go check in with my heart. Some of you are freeze. You curl up and you try to protect yourself because you can't handle this situation right now. Some of you are flight. You run as far as you can. You have been triggered inside and you are inflamed and you are running from that thing. Some of you are fawn. You're going to become codependent and you're going to cuddle up next to that bear. Tell that's the nicest bear that you've ever seen, even though that bear wants to eat your ass, right? I'm cussing a lot today. I'm going to go check in with myself. Great. The point is that what Jesus is moving us to is not a list of more sins. What Jesus is moving us towards is, oh, maybe you're leaking in this way because there's some hurt and pain that's going on in you that needs to be resolved. And you need to go take a deep look at that. That's what I hope for a mature community like ours. I hope for people to do that work. And just like 12-step rooms, it's about progress, not perfection. It's about a bunch of people who show up in the room again and again and again, and we share our strength and our hope and our power with one another. And there's going to be days that you have everything to give, and you are in that place where your trauma responses are calm, and you are able to see other people, and they're freaking out and losing their mind, and they're going through their thing, but you're able to comfort and care for them in this time of need. And there's going to be days that somebody does that for you. But that's going to be a choice for us, New Abbey. That's going to be a choice that says, no, that's the thing that I want to sign up for in this community. And that's what I'm hoping for. The story can end here for us. Jesus gave us a bigger story of God and said, hey, I know that conservative view of God wasn't working for you and made you feel small. It oppressed you. I'm letting you know it's super dumb. Don't worry about that. That's what you needed. Great. You want some theology books? Can give you to that. Need some podcasts? Here's Richard Rohr. You need a little bit of therapy? Perfect. You just need healing from that? We can do that here. If that's all you want, we can do that here. And there's quite literally been 1,000 people who have come through New Abbey, and they have gotten that here. I used to have these little notebooks every year. Every time someone new would come, it's like 5-star notebooks, like I'm in 7th grade, guys. I still have them in my library, right? And I would write people's names down. I would write prayers down. I flipped through them the other day of this person, hundreds and hundreds of people who are no longer here. But what I know is they found safety. They found healing. They're not worried about what hands you wash anymore. They have a bigger story of God. They're growing. But what I long for as the pastor, I don't have these notebooks yet, but go with me metaphorically, that I can open them up and I'm like, these are people that are doing maturity. They've been doing the work. They understand their trauma responses in the world. They're not just saying, oh, like the conversation over here is how far is too far, right? And the conversation over here in progressivism is I can do whatever I want. Both are not healthy. Both will not serve you. Don't think that this is freedom in progressive land. It's not. It's just different than that. The real answer is, how do I find wholeness? How do I find health? How do I keep growing in this thing? And how do I become a practitioner in the same way that Jesus is? I completely forgot this framework, so I'm going to end on it. Look at this framework real quick. It goes like this. This is what Jesus did with all of his disciples. I do and you watch. I do and you help. Eventually it goes, you do, right? Jesus sends you out and I help. And then eventually it's you do and I watch. We know that with parenting. This is what Jesus was doing with the disciples. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to heal. I'm going to share good news. I'm going to be there for that woman caught in adultery. I'm going to be there for that guy who's demonically possessed. I'm going to do it all, and I want you to watch. And then I'm going to go do, and then I want you to come along. Eventually, I'm going to send you out, and I'm going to watch you do it, right? I'm going to help you out with it. And then eventually, you're going to go, and you're going to be the mature people who are bringing healing everywhere that you go in the world. That's the mission of New Abbey. If you need to lay on the rowboat, keep laying there. We're always going to be a safe place for you. If you want to row with me, if you want to find more transformation and maturity, man, I think that's where our community is going to go. I think that's our future. I think it's going to be super hard work. People, it's an election year. It's going to suck. Let's do this thing. And I mean that. All of these things are going to be tested within us, right? But let's go find that maturity with one another. Would you find the same 3 or 4 people around you? Would you answer this question? How can you practice mature love? Enjoy.